Hello again. I'm back with another clock to repair. This one is an Ingraham alarm clock. It's one of the wonder clocks that I've been getting lately, as in you wonder what to do with it because they don't work. I got it from the website heirloomclocks.net, and the label that was attached to it read that it's the Ingraham model SA5 from 1936 and that it's not working. Aside from it not working, it has some cosmetic issues. There are veneer, looks like veneer wood on the sides, which seems to be warped coming away from the case. You can see there. On one side, a piece of veneer is missing from the bottom. Here's the back of it. Now, I do have an Ingraham book, and I was able to locate this in the book, and I'll show it to you. This is the book, Ingraham Clocks and Watches, and in it they have a section called Self-Starting Synchronous Alarm Clocks, and the model SA5 is pictured down here. You can see the little metal trim, the same square case, except if you notice it's a round dial. And the clock I have here has a square dial. But there's another model here, the SA7, also from 1936, and that has the exact same square dial as this clock does. And the advertising in the book, or the way they had it advertised, it reads that these alarm clocks are what they call 1, 2, 3 single tone chime alarm. I don't know exactly what that means, but the ads read, the greatest single advance ever made in an alarm clock. So if I can get it working, and we'll try to find out what the alarm does. For now, I'll set it up on my work table and open it up and to see if it's actually not working. The first thing I want to do is check the continuity of the wiring in here, see if the circuit is intact. For that, I use my own meter. I just touch the leads to the plug, and if numbers flash here, then I know that the circuit is intact. Okay, that's good. That means that this clock should be able to be repaired. Next, even though it's an old clock with a very old power cord, it looks to be in pretty good shape. So I'm going to plug it in and we'll see if it runs. Let me turn it on. And it's not running. Okay. The next step is going to be, I'm going to open it up. Okay, it looks as if it's just friction grip. I think I can pop this off without too much difficulty. Or maybe just a little. Here's one. And 3. And one thing I like to do when I take these clocks apart, because once you take parts off, you want to make sure you're putting them in the same position. So I'll label, for example, already this is rotated here, but on the back, I put a 12, which tells me that that's how the dial sits this way. Just in case when it's all totally apart, I kind of lose perspective. Same thing, I want the frame to go back on the same way. So I put a little 12 on the top of that. Next, I'm going to remove this plate from here, and a couple of interesting things. One is, this apparently is the alarm lever. Not very loud. And there's a stem here that has a slot in it like for a regular flathead screwdriver, and I realize it lines up on this back plate. Try to show through here, but it doesn't protrude. You have to go in with a small screwdriver to access it. So I do not know if that is to control, maybe to make the clock run fast or slow, but hopefully I'll figure that out once I've opened it up. Anyway, let me work on removing these 3 nuts here. I have 2 removed. Each one has a washer. Okay, let's lift this up and see what we have. Okay, not much there. So, a couple of nuts here holding this whole housing in position. And I'm not seeing anything on this side. I might be able to remove this entire motor. There's a couple of nuts holding that down. Let's try that first. That's very small. It'll take me a minute to undo that. Let me do that on my own so we don't spend a lot of time watching me unscrew things. I've removed one of the nuts and loosened the other, and this little bracket just slides off. So I think I can remove this motor from here, but what I want to show is, and this is why you always, and I always recommend it, you take photos before you take these things apart. As I'm moving this around, I find this part, and I'm thinking, well, where did this come from? But I went back and looked at the photos, and there's actually one over here, and this one sits here. And for whatever reason, there wasn't one over here. At least I haven't come across it yet. But I just marked these screws with a little red dot, so I know that's where these little spacers come from. Anyway, let's try to lift up the motor, see what happens. All right. Okay. Next, I'm going to want to figure out a way to open this up. And I imagine undo these 2 nuts here, and this little, whatever, cowl, whatever you want to call this, will just slide out. I think really this is the bell. Anyway, let me take a few more photos and then I'll take this apart. Before I undo this, however, I noticed that on the power cord here is exposed wiring. So what I'd like to do is remove this, put a new power cord on, and test to see if it's working now that it's removed from the mechanism here. I just have to undo these couple of nuts. Give me a minute to work on that, and then I'll continue. I've removed the cord, placed a new one. Just have to finish tightening up the nut here. Kind of an awkward design on this motor. You can't really do this too quickly. Okay, now we'll plug it in. Turn it on. And it's running. I don't know if you can see that. So I don't know if there's a gear that was kind of jammed or frozen in here, preventing this from turning. But once I have this apart, maybe cleaned up and reassembled, the whole thing just might work. Okay. Next step, to undo these two nuts here. Little washer there. Another plate. Okay. Small washer here. I'm going to take a few more photos now because with this removed, I can see clearly how these gears are all positioned in here. I want to have a good record of it. I'm also seeing springs. So let me work on that before I proceed. Okay, I've taken a lot of photos and I've been taking a really close look at this, and a couple of things that I've noticed that I want to pass on. One is, with most all of the other clocks I've worked on, once the motor is removed from here, the gears will turn very freely and I'm unable to budge any of these. So perhaps something is jammed in here, which is why the motor, even though it works, wasn't working in here. Another thing is I've figured out what this little stem that takes a screwdriver is for. It's not to make the clock run fast or slow. It actually controls the alarm. And I'll try to show how that works. Which way does this go? Let me get this on the right way first. There we go. What this does is when you turn it, it moves this alarm hammer either towards or away from the bell. The way it's positioned now, when it gets flicked, it rings the bell. If I rotate it, if you can see, it's moving the bell away from moving the hammer away from the bell. So when you flick it now, you don't hear it. So I imagine it's a method of making the alarm not be heard, but I don't really understand why this adjustment wouldn't be all the way through the back plate and even have some writing on the back plate saying, you know, how to adjust the alarm. Anyway, what I'm going to do next is, I think I'm going to have to try to remove this plate from this side. There's one nut holding it in. And so let me get to work on that. I've removed the one nut that's holding this plate over the gears. I started to try to lift the plate up a little, but I have this spring here that's attached. I'll try to show a post on the plate and this little arm that's sticking out over here. So I have to kind of take this spring off before I pull the plates apart. Yep, got it. Have to make sure I don't lose that. And I'll see how easy it is to slide this plate up. It's getting there. This is something I never rush because I don't need the gears all falling out. All right, I got it. So now, time for some more photos. You have a couple of gears over here. Need to take a close look at this arrangement, take photos of it, and then start to disassemble it. Let me try to get something to safely sit this on. And that's not it. Okay, so let me work on that and then I'll continue. I've figured out how most of these gears come apart, and I'll try to show it. Let me zoom in a little. One slides out from here. Two, three. I believe that's the set knob stem. And then we have the hammer for the alarm. Now the remaining gears on here seem to be pretty well locked in, and I really haven't figured out a way to remove these. I just may end up cleaning these as best I can, getting in with a toothbrush or a Q-tip, but there is a lot of dirt and oil on here. On the other plate, these gears appear to be riveted in place, so I'm not going to be able to remove them either. Again, I'll just clean it up as best I can. So that's what I'll work on next, get everything all cleaned up. All the parts are clean. I ended up placing this in the ultrasonic as well. I used some real hot soapy water with Dawn dish detergent. And what I need to do next is to lubricate everything. To do that, I use a synthetic clock oil. And I apply it with what are called oil pins. And you just take a little bit and place it at the end of the pivots on the gear. And you also, at least I do, place a little bit around each hole in the plate where the pivot fits into. You don't want to place any oil on the actual teeth of the gears. Those should remain dry. And I'll start to lubricate and reassemble everything, and I'll try to show as much of it as I can. I'll try to zoom in a bit for this. The first thing I did was to reattach the spring over here, and now I just have to pretty much reverse the order that I took everything apart. This is the alarm hammer. And then this one goes here. And then this. What I have to do next is reposition the plate back over it, reattach this other spring, and that'll take a while as I tease all of the pivots back into the holes on the plates. So let me work on that, and once it's together, then I'll continue. The plates are back together. What I had to do, let me zoom in. I had to place the nuts over the screws here to help position everything as I teased it into place. Otherwise, you push down on one side, the other side will pop up. But these have to be removed now in order to seat the bell and the outer plate. have to do that without causing any of the gears to come out of position. So this is a little time consuming, but it's the only way to do it. Now this went here. Now which way did this go? There we go. And then but first, these little spacers, one was there and there. Now I'm just going to place these 3 nuts back into position, and then I'll be ready to put the motor back into it. Now, if you've been paying attention, you realized what I forgot to do was place 3 nuts over the bell here, one on that little thread here. Now I can put these 3 back on. The motor is next. What I have to do now is secure it, this little plate back over here, put the 2 nuts to hold it in tight. Let me work on that. Once everything is secured, I'll be ready to plug it in and we'll see if it works. I've tightened it up. It's a very unusual set knob in that to screw it on is not the direction to set the hands. You have to go the other way, which ends up unscrewing it. So I had to really grip it and get it as tight as I could. Anyway, let me turn it back on. And what I'm going to do is pull out the alarm. Okay, so whatever time it is, it's now ringing. Let me advance the hand until it stops. Okay, so this is the hour that it stopped. Now, because I wrote a 12 over here, looks like it's still going a little bit. That would make it, looks like about 9 o'clock the alarm is set for. So, what I have to do next, let me turn it off. I will seat the alarm hand. And I think what will make this really easy, or easier, is if I seat the dial. And if this was about the 9, then I can put the alarm hand at the 9. So if it's correct, that means if I now set the alarm for, let's say, 12, and that, there we go. Plug it back in, turn it on. Okay, let's advance the time to 12 and see what happens. Okay, it's actually 11. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm going to reposition this to the 11, and at that point I think we'll be good. I just have to clean up the glass and the rim, reattach that, and then I'll be able to focus on trying to fix up the wood case. So let me work on all of that and then we'll continue. I've adjusted the alarm and the hands, and then I set it for 2 o'clock, turned it to about 5 minutes to 2 and let it run, and the alarm went off about a couple of minutes past 2, so I think that's about as accurate as I'm going to get it. Next, I've cleaned up the glass, which I'm going to place back in the rim, and seat the clock back in it. Okay, next I just have to fold these tabs back in. Here's 1, 2, and 3. All right, can put this aside now. Focus on the case. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, the wood has warped away from the side here. I think a bit of glue and a clamp, I can probably repair that. I'm going to look for a piece of veneer to place here, try to stain it to match. And there are these brass trim that's going around the case, and they seem to be nailed down, and a couple of them have come away kind of loose. So hopefully I can tack those back down, clean up the wood, probably go over it with my Howard's Restore Finish, and then try to give it a waxing. So let me work on all of that, and when I finished with it, I'll continue. You'll see the finished case. Actually, if I can show some of the progress along the way, I will, rather than just ending up with a finished case. I've placed some wood glue in here, and I have a clamp. Let's just tighten it up a bit. Okay, bring it up a little higher. Okay, this will take a couple of hours to set, so I'm going to let it sit for that long, and then I'll continue. Okay, I've glued down the warped veneer on this side of the case, and I've come up with a piece of veneer that I plan to use to fill in where it's missing. The first thing that I'm going to do is stain it as close to match this as I can, then glue it down, and then just trim off the excess. So I'll work on that next. I've stained the piece of veneer. I think it's a close match. It's not 100%. I plan to glue it down right here. and then just trim off the excess. And I think it'll look a lot better than that. What I've also done is cleaned all the dirt off the wood. I also polished up the brass trim. And let me work on gluing down the veneer now. I've glued down and trimmed the veneer, and I think it came out looking pretty good, all things considered. What I want to do next is go over the whole case with my Howard's Restore Finish and the feed and wax, get it looking as good as I can before placing the clock back into it. So let me work on that. I finished the work on the case, and I think it came out looking really good. So much so that I decided to touch up. I thought that the black painting along the trim here was kind of dull, so I repainted all of the black. And to sort of complete the restoration, now that I've done this much, there's a lot of scratches on the back plate. I'm going to look to paint this as well, and I think at the end everything's going to be looking really good. So let me work on this next. I've painted the back plate, and the next step is to just reassemble everything. The first thing I have to do is pass the power cord through the back of the plate. And then through the back of the clock case. And what I have to do next is reattach it to the back of the clock. So let me work on that, then I'll be ready to insert it into the case. The power cord is attached. One thing I have to do before placing this back into the case is remove the set knob. Otherwise, it won't pass through the back plate. Okay. Now let me work on putting this back on, and then I'll slide the back plate over it. Actually, what I meant to say was I have to slide the plate over first. Then I can reattach my set knob. First, I want to place these little nuts back over here. Okay, one. Now let's make sure that the dial is centered, and it is, because it's a square, not a problem. Just have to put the couple of screws back in here. We'll go there. And here. for the set knob. Now that I painted the back plate, I don't want to scratch it up. And I have to hold it snug as I put this on. Okay. Next, I'm going to set this back up on my workbench, plug it in, and make sure that it's still working. I have it plugged in. Let me turn it on. And it's running. So there you have it. It's the Ingraham model SA5 from 1936. That makes it about 88 years old. And I'm very pleased with how this one came out. I think it's quite a handsome looking clock. Pretty much from all sides. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to check out some of my others. Your questions and comments are always welcome and appreciated. And that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.